This is Becoming UnDone.
Before we get too deep, as always in these docuseries show, a simple request. Stay with me. I promise this episode really is about Larry Johnson. Eventually. It might take me a minute to get there, but I swear I will. So stick around. And maybe second thing second, sorry I'm a little late this week. Holiday had me a little behind, and I am working to catch up, but pretty excited about what's coming down the road. Let me tell you about 1993. New Year's Eve hit different for me in 1993. I grew up in a spot in the road in rural southern Illinois. I attended a tiny high school. And in that classic big fish, small pond scenario, I fancied myself a big fish. Band, student council, cross country, although I never once finished a meet, so that's kind of a bit of a stretch. Academic teams, and more. But without a doubt, my absolute favorite school activity was basketball. In a small school, it doesn't pay to specialize. Every teacher or coach at a small school knows that they have to be able to share in order to be able to fill out their rosters. So for most of us, we pretty much did it all. And what's more, we had done it all, as in past tense, as in most years. I always love to tell people that I played some varsity my freshman year and started as a sophomore on the basketball team. What I usually didn't tell them, however, was that my freshman year we had 3 seniors. My sophomore year, we had 1 who hadn't played organized basketball since junior high. It wasn't really so much that I was good enough to play varsity. It's that there was plenty of lightly contested playing time to go around. But all that aside, the tick of the clock from December 31st, 1992 at 11:59:59 till January 1st, 1993 at 12 midnight was not met in my mind with joy and celebration. Instead, it was met with angst and sorrow and dread. What probably should have been a semester of happiness and optimism as I neared the finish line of high school wasn't that for me at all. Instead, I knew that my entire identity was about to come to a screeching halt, and there was absolutely nothing I could do about it. It's funny to me looking back at how sports and friends and activities that would define our entire existence in our early years can so quickly be nothing but a memory in our lives just a few months later. And I have proof. At least I used to. I think my mom lost it. But for a while there, I had proof. Fall of my senior year in 1992, it was time for senior pictures. In my neck of the woods, there weren't a ton of options for photographers. There were homegrown pics that the parents who couldn't afford them might take. There were the typical lame school headshots. Or, at our school, there was the expensive route. Todd Farron Photography. All the popular kids in the class before me had had their senior pictures taken at Todd Farron Photography. I Googled him before this show, and I see no signs that anyone by that name is still in the photography game in Marion, Illinois. But back then, shoot, Todd Farron pics were like the currency exchanged only by the social elite. Looking back, I honestly can't believe I got them. I have no recollection how much they cost, but I know they were expensive. And even scheduling the time at the studio had to be done months in advance, which ended up creating quite an issue. My on-again, off-again girlfriend and I were on again when my mom called to reserve us a spot. It wasn't a Hallmark Channel couple shoot, but we picked back-to-back slots on a Saturday in December. Problem was, by the time that date rolled around, we were off again. Awkward. The day of the shoot, it was snowy and the roads were getting slick. So my then ex-girlfriend and I decided we would drive over together. We agreed that it would be safer that way, but we wouldn't fight or otherwise make it harder on the other person. Ahead of time, Farron Photography informed us both that we would get no more than 4 wardrobe changes. Pressure of what to wear was huge in my mind. These would probably be the most important pics of my life, at least up to that point. and they'd for sure be the most expensive. Anyhow, what I'd wear would be my signal to the world about what I thought of my own identity. Up first was my band uniform. Now don't laugh. I swear I'm not making this up. Band was pretty cool at my school. And better than that, the drumline was the coolest part of the band. I got my first iconic senior shots with my polished white quarter snare drum on the harness, a brand that doesn't even exist anymore, my beat up and award-winning white marching snare sticks in hand, and a pair of white Oakley shades that I'd saved up for months to buy on, mean mugging the whole time. Even in looking at the lone remaining shot that I have in that uniform today, I still think it's one of the coolest pictures of me ever taken. Up next, I chose my new starter Raiders jersey with color-matched Malcolm X hat. Now, if you followed along in earlier episodes, you know what I think about the starter corp. It was a bold choice, to be sure. A goofy white kid wearing a jersey straight out of an NWA video with a hat celebrating a black revolutionary who probably would not have approved was my attempt to signal my allegiances to all things black. I had never so much as heard of cultural appropriation at that time, and I sure wasn't trying to be disrespectful. I thought it was cool. That was the pick I chose to be placed in my high school yearbook for all posterity. Outfit 2, check. Past the midway point now. 2 out of 4 done, 2 to go. For scene 3, I put on my home white with maroon trim basketball uniform, complete with my non-color matched black and purple Nike Air Force 180 Barclays. Fair and Photography had this mock locker room scene that made for a cool backdrop. And in this totally understandable breach of etiquette, after all, Todd didn't know that we weren't still dating, he insisted that we take a photo together in that space. Me in my basketball uniform with a Rawlings game ball in hand, and my now ex-girlfriend behind me in her matching cheerleading uniform. At the time, we were both too shy and unassertive to resist his clear instructions, so we had our picture made together for the next to last time. It, too, was awkward. But not as awkward as the homecoming game a few days later when things had gotten worse between us. She was crowned homecoming queen, and I as homecoming king. She posed for the camera and warned me through a strained smile. "Don't ruin this for me," she said. Whew, awkward. So that's 3 of 4. A band uniform, a starter jersey, a basketball uniform. Room for one last outfit to represent exactly what I was to the world in 4 Todd Farron photographs or less. What would I choose? I'll tell you what I chose, and I didn't even hesitate. But to fully appreciate it, you need to see it. Sadly, it appears to be lost somewhere in one of my parents' mini moves. I'll do my best to recreate it for you in the best detail I can to conjure it up, but it's darn near a tragedy that this pic seems to be gone. Solid white backdrop, white archway, all so very early 90s senior picture photo shoot. But ostensibly no massive block 9-3 numbers to lean up against. But glaring whiteness nonetheless. My attire was a carefully curated, complimentary set of white Lee factory outlet jorts, sagged as best I could, with a pair of Charlotte Hornet boxer shorts peeking out of the waistband. Now that I think back, I guess I had my jersey tucked into my boxers along with my t-shirt, just so you could see the Hornets logo. That can't be right, can it? Can it? Maybe. Good Lord. A plain white sleeve t-shirt was my base layer, and a cotton teal, I want to say champion brand Larry Johnson number 2 jersey was front and center. Topping it all off was a black Charlotte Hornets snapback hat with the cool Hornets logo on the front and the big block Hornets in all caps embroidered and arched across the back. For kicks, the matching black and teal LJ Converse sneakers with that cool React juice. Famously, that juice would prove problematic for Converse and leak out onto basketball courts. But not mine. Not at that moment. My juice was pristine. I'm posed in some kind of weird right arm overhead leaning on the archway kind of look that we used to do for senior pictures But at no other moment in our lives, it was a good hat, but it was sized down too small with the bill pointing almost vertical with my feathered bangs peeking out from beneath. Laugh all you want, but I'd take that hair back in a heartbeat. But here's my point in telling you this story. At 17 years of age, I was given a choice, the free will, the ability to select 4 and only 4 outfits that I could use to tell the world who I was and what I was about. I chose music, a band uniform, and sports, a basketball uniform, and black culture, Raiders starter jersey with X cap. And in my mind, the confluence and icon and avatar of all 3 of those in one, Larry Johnson. Now, it was an awkward drive home from the photo shoot, and despite the fact that my mom has misplaced the evidence that it ever happened, that shoot was a cherished memory and a special moment in my life. Before New Year struck, the spring semester came, and it all got so suddenly and abruptly taken away by May. But meanwhile, back in Charlotte, North Carolina, in an authentic NBA jersey, in front of record-breaking crowds and a steadily growing fan following, the real Larry Johnson was having moment after moment of his own. Just one season removed from being awarded the NBA's Rookie of the Year, which I'll remind you, High School Player of the Year as a senior in 87, Junior College Player of the Year at Odessa College in 88 and 89, NCAA Player of the Year in 90 and 91. Larry is awarded an NBA Rookie of the Year in 92. If there's a more incredible 6-year run of awards in any sport, I'd be stunned. But anyway, that second year in the league, while I was getting senior pictures made and worrying about the end of life as I knew it, Larry started in 82 games for the Hornets, averaged 40.5 minutes, put up a career-high 22.1 points, and almost career-high 10.5 boards per game. He was named an Eastern Conference All-Star while also being named to the second-team All-NBA for the season. Meanwhile, that Hornets team posted the first winning record in franchise history, going 44-38, and they beat the Celtics in the first round of the NBA playoffs. Although they'd eventually lose to the Knicks, Charlotte led the league in attendance. It was a new era for Charlotte. It was an apex moment in the career of Larry Johnson. And through every step, George Bass was there, either figuratively or literally, as sports agent to some of the hottest names in sports, with none hotter at the time than LJ. And I had the jersey and the stellar senior picture to prove it. Joining me today is President of AAI Sports, George Bass Jr. In addition to being a Baylor alum, George has represented some of pro sports' brightest stars, including Michael Irvin of the Dallas Cowboys, and of course, Larry Johnson, both of whom he helped become the then highest paid players in their respective sports. George, thanks so much for joining me today.
Hey, Toby, thanks for having me.
So you're prolific in the agent space, and my show is really all about how sometimes setbacks and adversity and maybe unexpected changes of direction can lead us into even more successful pathways. So let's start with your story. I shared a bit from your bio, but tell me how you got into becoming a sports agent.
Very interesting, isn't it? Probably not the path that I chose, or thought about when I was at Baylor. I went to Baylor University to be a doctor, and that was the plan. I probably had 3 things I wanted to do growing up, and that was be a doctor, and be a doctor, But when I got there, I was probably not suited very well for being a doctor. And, I switched over to the business school and got a degree in accounting and, spent time in public accounting, in the tax world. And, it kind of made my way over to Dallas, Texas with some friends and went to work for a big real estate developer and a real estate guy here in Dallas. And it worked out from being the controller to his CFO. And he had a sports business that was struggling at that time. So one day I was talking to him about it and saying, hey, you need to fund this to sports. And he was a little disgusted. And I said, well, if you'd run it like a business, you would probably be, very successful. So I wrote him a business plan and, few weeks later, he walks into my office and throws it on my desk, says, "Hey, you're running sports." So basically that's how I got to sports. And I started out, I was not an agent. I was basically the guy who ran the numbers behind the scenes. So
that's tremendous. Well, sometimes it pays just to be in the right place at the right time. And lots of times that training we get, we don't realize how it's applicable in a different path altogether.
That's right. Because from that point on, most of the contracts that I worked on and for my clients, we had a tax angle. At times we were looking like, is this the best thing to do? Can we take insurance benefit, life insurance, liability off the team and take on it for ourselves and be tax efficient with it? And it worked out well for our guys. Yeah,
that's tremendous. Well, being in the Dallas area, obviously Larry grew up there. I had the pleasure of speaking with his high school coach, J.D. Mayo. And so I'm guessing there's a geographic connection there. But coming into that 1991 NBA draft, he was the most prolific player coming out of college. How did you become his agent?
Well, you know what? His mom worked at a school, and she worked in the cafeteria in South Dallas. And during the summertime, she would come up to Bent Tree Country Club, and she would work at the swimming pool, and she was there. She knew one of our partners who was a member there. And one day she was talking to him, and Larry was probably a lot younger, and said, "Hey, if my son ever had an opportunity to play pro sports, would you guys help him?" And of course you're like, "Well, absolutely we would." So it was one of those, right time, right place. And Dorothy Johnson, she became one of my very best friends, Larry's mom, and just a wonderful lady who she was in charge. I can just tell you, she was in charge of Larry. And yet you probably got that from Coach Mayo, because Coach Mayo is a great friend of mine now. And we see each other 3 or 4 times a year, and a good friend. But Dorothy was in charge. And so that's the way we made our way over to the Johnson family.
Yeah. I've heard story after story, whether it was Coach Mayo or Larry's coach at Odessa. Just Larry's mom was just an impactful figure who really had a vision for who he was going to become, probably before anybody else. And in a lot of ways helped kind of will that into existence. So sad that I don't get a chance to talk to her, but it's easy to see the legacy she left behind just in the way folks talk about her.
Absolutely. She was a gem. I love her. I loved her to death.
Well, as history tells us, Larry goes to Charlotte. He's the first overall pick. And my first episode, I really talk about how it was kind of this confluence. Charlotte's kind of the new money of the NBA. They've got the trendy color scheme and the new logos and, a fan base that had been really about college basketball up to that point, but then they're breaking league attendance records, and Larry's right there in the middle of it. And then later, obviously the Grandmama campaign that we still talk about today. What do you remember about his first few years in the league?
Wow, that was an exciting time. You know what? I think we ended up signing Larry the day of his first game. We were struggling with the Hornets at that time, and Mr. Shin, George Shin was the owner at that time, of course. And we could not get him over the $20 million number for Larry's contract. And so we were back and forth. So we're taking it all the way. He missed camp, and we take him all the way up to the first game, and we made a deal with him. And I remember flying over and getting him signed up, and George, George did not want to pay him $20 million. So he paid him $19,999,999. He would not pay him $20 million. And so we're like, come on, And so that came into play a few years later when we did another contract, but that was a point that he did not want to do. So, but the big thing is we jumped on the flight. We came over, signed the contract. Larry laced up his Converse and went and played Larry Bird for his first game. Wow. So that was a great night.
Yeah. Well, famously, Charlotte has this massive arena, and it kind of quickly became dated by today's standards. They didn't have necessarily the luxury suites that some of the newer facilities did, but they filled the place up. What do you think Larry's role in that early growth in that Charlotte marketplace was. Would you say he was a central part of them? Oh, really? They had a following before they were really any good.
Absolutely. You know what? They had some real visionaries there with their uniforms, with Spencer Stolpen. I don't think anybody's talked about Spencer, but Spencer was the general manager and the president of the team when we did Larry's big contract. But he was always like, George, this contract, I know it's big, but he's going to be so far underpaid by the time we get to the end of this contract because the NBA's growing. And we used to talk about that. And it was just wonderful to see the vision that he had. And they had a bunch of those people over there. Harold, I know you talked with Harold. Mm-hmm. Harold did a great job, but Spencer had this plan, and he saw how the NBA was growing. And Larry, Larry is he's a humble guy. He comes in, the fans just fall in love with him. And then we land on Grandmama with Converse. And it was a perfect storm. The NBA, he was in the slam dunk competition, if you remember.
Yeah.
And Cedric Sabalas ended up winning, but Larry was in there. I mean, it was just a perfect storm, and Larry was the perfect guy because the fans fell in love with him. He had that gold tooth. I mean, and Grandmama, it was so much fun.
Yeah, it was definitely a season of change in the NBA where teams like the Hornets were recognizing that this wasn't just basketball, this was entertainment, and they did a really good job of kind of moving the needle forward. We see teams like the Savannah Bananas and lots of pro sports teams have promotions and things like that, but it seems like Charlotte was an early adopter, and Larry was certainly central to that. Well, sadly, he signs the richest contract in league history, and he's the face not just of the Hornets, but of Charlotte pro sports. And I think people think he's going to be there forever, and he gets injured, and he's not the same player, and almost the unthinkable. Like 2 years later, he's on the chopping block to be traded away. What would you say that time was like for him, and how did it impact your relationship?
Well, you know what? It really did impact our relationship because, Larry was going to work. That injury was bothering him. His back was bothering him. But he did everything he could, to keep his game at a high level. And it's a little tough on a player when all of a sudden the rumors start talking about being traded to the LA Clippers. You may remember that, but they're like, George Shinn's like, hey, we're going to trade you to the LA Clippers. And we're like, okay, I don't think the LA Clippers are going to pay his contract.
Yeah.
And for one thing. But the other thing is, Larry had a 15% trade clause on his contract. Mm-hmm. So we'd put that in there when we signed the big deal. So if you went back and looked at the numbers then, that was about a $9.6 million increase in his contract. Mm. And so they had narrowed it down to two teams, and it was the Knicks. And we'd met with the Knicks. We had talked with them, and it was Dave Checketts and Ernie Grunfeld. And you could just see how excited they were, to have Larry. Mm-hmm. And Jeff Van Gundy was the coach. When we go up and he's in his little office there in Purchase downstairs, and it's just like a hole, and we walk in and he's got videotapes of Larry, of just all of his tape. And they sit down and start talking basketball right there. And so, you go, wow, this is going to be really pretty cool.
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of those things that didn't start out great, but man, it ended up nice.
Yeah. He always had that vibe of like a professor who happens to be a basketball coach, like, this mad scientist of hoops. And so Larry's game initially, UNLV for sure, he's this explosive dunker. He's really undersized at his position, but because of his physicality, he's able to be successful there. And same thing holds true in Charlotte. I remember that cover of Slam magazine where he's, the face of this brand new thing and NBA inside stuff with Ahmad Rashad. He's front and center, it seems like every week. And then at New York, he's not that explosive athlete anymore. He's really more of an outside scoring threat. So from your perspective, did you see a change in him going from this explosive kind of new money of the NBA to someone who is really having to fight for his life to extend his career in some ways.
You did, but Larry's just a survivor. He's like, okay. And I don't remember when Jeff was out and Coach Thibodeau came in, but all of a sudden Larry was a point forward, and you're like, it was kind of, he was evolved into a new position, and nobody could really pass the ball like Larry at that point at the power forward position. So all of a sudden he's coming down the court and he's got mismatches. So, and it really developed into a new level of play, something that they're very similarly they're doing now. If you've watched them, and Coach Thibodeau's there, and it's a very similar style. And I mean, the game has changed a lot with the outside shooting, but Larry just worked to develop whatever changes he had to continue to play and be successful.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's any doubt. And it's the reason I chose him for my first docuseries is he's overcome some incredible things, and not just injury, but from his upbringing to academic issues that led him to a different path other than SMU to the injury and changing his game. What stands out in your mind in terms of resilience and overcoming that you see exemplified in Larry's life?
Well, just the human being he is. I mean, there's not a finer person. And, I think that you think back on his career. I've heard you ask other people that question about what you saw. And I go back to when Larry was doing the very first Converse commercial. And we all knew his basketball skills then and the player he was on the court, because we'd seen it at UNLV and everything they had done. But they had been shooting B-reel of Larry, with all this dunks and all these different things he was doing. He was dressed up as grandma at that time, and Roger probably told you that Grandmama was not the first choice of what they were going to do. So that was a great story within itself. But then, and we were shooting at Woodrow Wilson High School in Dallas at an old gym that was really cool. And when we got there, it was like a movie set. And, you're like, okay, Larry's a great basketball player, but what's he going to be like in a commercial? Mm-hmm. Well, they got all that shot and Grandmama was doing, and they gave him these lines, and he's doing these lines back and forth, and he's dribbling the ball toward him. And he's like, you can't stop what you can't catch, and you can't catch what you can't stop. And the director kept throwing these lines at him. And finally they said, cut.
These are my new shoes from Converse. They're so light and so fast, my grandmama can whoop you in them. Grandmama! Let's go. What? Shoot like you like it all night. Move it, Granny, move it. Remember, you can't beat what you can't catch. Okay, Granny, 1-on-1, me and you. That was a lucky shot, Grandma.
And the whole place erupted. I mean, Larry was this actor that we had never dreamed of, and you're just like, oh my gosh, that was like incredible. And the whole place just went wild. Roger probably didn't tell you that story, but I mean, Roger goes wild, and we're like, man, this is going to be more fun. So he's just adapted, and he's just, the finest person you ever want to meet.
Yeah. Well, I've certainly been inspired further in digging into his story and hearing about things like his play with Team USA and just so many lives that he impacted along the way. That
right.
Whether it was his way with kids at Odessa College or making sure that Converse shoes got to his old teams or just things that he did that he didn't have to. And I've just really been struck with how humility really seems to be woven in. And I'm like, thank goodness I wasn't that kind of superstar, because I would have been insufferable. But this guy, an incredible gift, and he worked hard, but he didn't lose sight of the fact that I think Harold said it best. He said he realized that for many of the people he met, this was like the best day of their life.
And you know what? He's still like that. I mean, he's absolutely still like that. He takes time with people. He's coming to Dallas later this month. Of course, Coach Mayo will all get together. I mean, he still takes time with everybody. He's always been like that. And his NBA career and his college career haven't changed him. He's still the same guy.
Yeah, that's tremendous. Well, last one here. It's been a long ride, and Larry's been with you as your client and as your friend. What do you think stands out the most? What's the most memorable, maybe story or aspect of your time working with Larry Johnson?
Well, there's a lot. There's a whole lot. I guess one of the neatest things that I ever got to see was we were doing an autograph show in Somerset, New Jersey. And Larry would do those from time to time, but this was more of a football related thing that a guy named Mike Bertolini put together, and he had everybody there. And he had asked me about Larry. I said, let me call Larry. And I said, Larry, there's an autograph show in Somerset. It's not far down the road from you guys, but Muhammad Ali's going to be there. And Larry's like, G, I am in. He called me G all the time. He goes, G, I am in. So we're down there and everybody's there. I mean, Emmitt Smith, Michael Irvin, Darren Woodson. I had a bunch of clients there, and Troy Aikman, and it went on and on and on. And all these fans, it's a huge convention center, and all these fans are out front, and these guys come out and they're signing autographs for them, and the fans are just excited and giddy. But you go back behind the curtain where all the pro athletes are, and these guys are all giddy. They are waiting on Muhammad Ali to get there. And LJ, that's his favorite guy.
Yeah.
So LJ, all of a sudden the word starts getting out. Ali's here, and I've got this picture in my office. It's one of my favorite pictures, and it's Larry and Muhammad Ali sitting there talking. And that was he had so much fun. Ali was in bad shape, not in bad shape, but he couldn't speak real loud. But that was one of the most exciting times that I've seen Larry going, man, this is so much fun. And they had just the best conversation, just the two of them there.
Well, that's I think if I really have to boil it down, it's Larry's, he's so down to earth in his humanity. I've never met him, but at the same time, as a high school kid growing up, he just seemed like the kind of guy that would take time to let you know that you mattered. And hearing a story like that, it's just surreal to think about a superstar in so many people's eyes is a fan in that moment. And he's, he's on the giving end of that giving and receiving. And that's just so remarkable. Yeah.
Well, he's always been like that. And you know what? It's been such a blessing for me to be able to work with him. So we're close and we've had a great time together.
Yeah. Well, George, it's been great chatting with you. If folks want to follow your work or keep tabs on what's going on at AAI, where can I send them?
Well, just, AAIsports.com is my website. And if there's a place they can email me from there, or George, Gbass at AAIsports.com, and, I'll get back to them.
Well, that's tremendous. I can't thank you enough. It's been really insightful. I appreciate your time. And if there's anything I can ever do to return the favor, you're down in Waco, you know where to find me.
Well, take care of my Baylor Bears down there. I'm George Bass, and I am undone.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay, Toby, thanks.
George, it's been a wild ride with some of the biggest names in sports, especially Texas sports. I'm thankful to George for dropping in today and sincerely hope you enjoyed our conversation. Next time on the Becoming UnDone docuseries, The Making and Remaking of Larry Johnson, we'll connect with former Kansas Jayhawk basketball star and Converse exec Roger Morningstar to hear all about the ad campaign that almost was with Larry Johnson, Larry Bird, and Magic Johnson, as well as the legendary Grandmama Converse shoe campaign that came instead. And in other exciting news, we are finalizing a time to hear from Larry himself, and I hope to celebrate part 9 of this series and episode 100 overall for me in Becoming UnDone with an interview of the one and only Larry Johnson. Stick around, tell a friend. and give it a listen. Once again this week, I am personally inviting you, the listener who made it this far, my loyal friend, fellow high achiever, you. I want you to sign up for my free email newsletter, which will go out every Sunday starting this Sunday. Go to undonepodcast.ck.page and sign up. It's totally free and something I hope you'll enjoy, becoming part of the Undone community. In other big news, I've also created a piping hot new YouTube channel. I dorkily referred to it as a YouTube page last week, which was wrong. You can find the interviews and clips from recent episodes. Go to youtube.com/@undonepodcast and check it out. Lord willing, I'll see you again next Thursday. Becoming Undone is a Nitro Hype creative production written and produced by me, Toby Brooks. Tell a friend about the show and follow along on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Becoming UnDone Pod. And follow me at Toby J. Brooks on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Check out my link tree at linktr.ee/Toby J. Brooks. Listen, subscribe, and please leave me a review at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. Till next time, my friend, keep getting better.